The bell struck the glass once, and Matthew Dale stopped breathing. Temperance Foxley saw it happen before anyone else did. The falconer's weathered face emptied of colour, his hands fell still at his sides, and his eyes fixed upon the small silver bell hanging beyond the east casement, as though he had been shown the instrument of his own judgment. Dawn had barely reached Halebury Court. The October sky over Yorkshire remained a pale, uncertain grey, and the household had not yet begun the ordered stir that preceded an aristocratic hawking morning. Yet 6 people now stood inside Temperance's bedchamber, all of them listening to the silence that followed that single, delicate note. The bell hung outside the locked window by a narrow loop of green waxed wire. It turned slightly in the wind, flashing against the cold glass. Temperance's door had been locked from within all night. The casement latch remained fastened. No servant had entered before she rang for assistance. Those facts had not troubled Lady Diana Marcham, who stood near the hearth in a plum-coloured morning gown, and regarded the bell with the composed impatience of a woman whose plans had been delayed by someone else's alarm. They had troubled Matthew Dale. They had troubled him so deeply that Temperance felt her own fear shift into something sharper. "You know it," she said. Matthew's gaze jerked toward her, then dropped. "I know many bells, ma'am." His voice was rough. "That's what I'm paid for." "You knew that one before you had time to inspect it." Valentine Marcham gave a soft, humourless laugh from beside the door. He had arrived in boots polished for the field, and an expression prepared for inconvenience. "Mrs. Foxley, a man may start at anything when summoned from his bed before breakfast. We needn't build a conspiracy from a nervous servant and a draughty window." Temperance looked at him. Mr. Dale was not looking at the window. Valentine's mouth thinned. No, he was looking at the engraving. The Duke of Halebury moved then. Until that moment, Humphrey Caverton had stood near the foot of the bed, silent and wholly awake despite the hour, taking in the room with a steadiness that made every other person seem hurried. He was dressed simply for the morning, in dark trousers, riding boots, and a coat not yet exchanged for the one he would wear before his guests. His face held none of Valentine's amusement and none of Diana's irritation. He looked first at Matthew, then at the bell, then at Temperance. "What did you see, Mrs. Foxley?" he asked. Not what did she imagine. Not what had frightened her. What did she see? The distinction settled somewhere inside her with almost painful force. "The bell moved when the wind tightened the wire," she said. "It touched the glass once." Mr. Dale entered a moment later with Her Grace and Mrs. Wren. He looked directly at the lower edge, where the number is engraved. Then he froze. Humphrey's attention returned to Matthew. "Is there a number?" The falconer swallowed. "Yes, Your Grace. Read it." Matthew did not step nearer. H17. The Dowager Duchess, wrapped in a dark wool shawl over her morning dress, drew a quiet breath. Mrs. Wren, the housekeeper, crossed herself so quickly that she seemed not to know she had done it. Humphrey noticed both reactions, but addressed only the falconer, and H17 belonged to. Matthew's jaw worked before the answer came. "Rook, Your Grace." For the first time, Diana's composure altered. It was no more than a narrowing of her eyes, but Temperance saw it. "Rook is the tiercel that was lost," Diana said, "more than a fortnight ago." 16 days, Matthew replied. "Lost over the North Moor." "Then this is easily explained," Valentine said. "Someone found the bell and decided upon a tasteless prank." He glanced at Temperance with polished sympathy. "Mrs. Foxley has had a shock, no doubt. A widow alone in an unfamiliar room might be expected to hear significance in a very small sound. Temperance had heard such sentences before. Her late husband had possessed an entire vocabulary for diminishing certainty without appearing cruel. Fancy, nerves, over-attention, a woman's habit of making meanings where none existed. For years, she had learned to soften her own statements before anyone else could do it for her. This morning, she did not. "A prank requires access," she said. The door was locked. The casement was latched. The bell is outside. "A determined servant might have managed it," Diana replied, "or someone seeking notice might have arranged more than she admits." The insult arrived wrapped in silk. Temperance felt it land. Humphrey turned his head toward Diana. His expression did not harden. It became quieter. "Mrs. Foxley has reported a fact," he said. "We shall not convert it into a defect of temperament." The room went still. Diana lowered her eyes first. "Of course, Your Grace. I meant only that extraordinary events invite extraordinary explanations. They invite careful ones." Humphrey looked back at Temperance. "Do you wish to leave the room while the window is examined?" The question caught her unprepared. Every instinct, shaped by years of correction, urged her to accept removal, to become convenient, to let men determine what had happened near her bed while she waited elsewhere for a softened account. Beyond the glass, the bell turned once more. It did not strike. Matthew watched it with the dread of a man waiting for a second sound. "No," Temperance said. "I would prefer to remain." Humphrey inclined his head as though she had made a reasonable choice and nothing more. "Then you shall." He crossed toward the casement, but stopped an arm's length away. "No one touches the latch. No one opens the window. Mrs. Wren, send for Mr. Barlow, the estate smith. Have him bring a ladder and 2 men he trusts. Mother, will you remain with Mrs. Foxley?" "Certainly," the dowager said. Valentine stepped away from the door. "Surely there is no need to rouse the entire estate over a falcon's bell." Humphrey glanced at him. "There is no need to rouse the entire estate. There is every need to preserve the condition in which it was found. You speak as though a crime has occurred. I speak as though someone stood outside a locked bedchamber window in the night." That ended the discussion. Mrs. Wren left to summon the smith. Diana moved nearer the fire, her posture graceful and closed. Matthew remained where he was, but his right hand had begun to tremble. Temperance noticed a faint line of dark wax beneath one of his thumbnails. She did not mention it. Not yet. Humphrey studied the bell through the glass, careful not to disturb the curtains or frame. The silver surface bore tiny marks from use. H17 was clearly visible near the rim. The wire passed through the bell's narrow fastening and rose toward the stonework above the window, where morning shadow concealed its end. "Rook wore 2 bells," Temperance said. Matthew's head lifted. Humphrey looked at her. "How do you know?" "The empty holes on the Jess strap in the portrait downstairs, one on either side." She had noticed the painting upon her arrival at Halebury 3 days before, though Diana had laughed when she paused before it. The second bell would balance the first. Matthew's face tightened. H18. "Was it lost with him?" Humphrey asked. "Yes, Your Grace." The answer came too quickly. Humphrey heard it. Temperance knew he did because his eyes sharpened, though his voice remained even. "We will examine the Mews record after this window." Matthew bowed his head. "Yes, Your Grace." A gust moved along the eastern wall. The wire drew taut above the casement. H17 swung, but this time Humphrey lifted one hand, not touching the glass, only following the line with his gaze. "There," he said. Temperance stepped nearer, stopping beside the curtain. From the bell, The green waxed loop extended upward toward the stone rainspout. Near the bend, a short broken end projected like a snapped thorn. Something darker appeared to be caught higher in the masonry, beyond the reach of anyone inside the room. Humphrey's eyes met hers in the reflection of the glass. There was no pity in his face, no indulgence, only attention. "You were right to ring," he said. Temperance held his gaze. She did not thank him for believing what was in front of them. Somehow, she sensed he would understand why. Behind them, Matthew Dale whispered, "God help me." And the little silver bell turned soundlessly in the growing light. By the time Mr. Barlow arrived with 2 estate men and a ladder, the morning had brightened enough to show every mark upon the stone outside Temperance's window. The bell still hung beyond the glass. It had not sounded again. Matthew Dale stood near the door with his hands clasped behind him, though the posture did not hide the tremor in his right thumb. Lady Diana remained beside the hearth. Valentine had moved to the mantel, where he watched the preparations with the impatience of a gentleman forced to witness work he considered beneath him. Mr. Barlow removed his cap upon entering. He was a broad man with iron-grey hair and a leather apron hastily buckled over his shirt. "Your Grace." Humphrey pointed toward the upper corner of the casement. "Nothing is to be cut, unless there is no other means of removal. I want the bell, the loop around it, and whatever remains on the stone kept separate." "Yes, Your Grace." Barlow examined the latch from inside without touching it. Fastened true. "It has not been opened since last night," Temperance said. He gave her a respectful nod. "Then we'll go above." The estate men carried the ladder through the adjoining passage to the narrow service court below the conservatory roof. Mrs. Wren opened the old roof stair with a ring of household keys, then returned to the room so that no one might later claim the evidence had been left unwatched. Humphrey took his place near the window. He did not crowd Temperance, yet his presence altered the room. Valentine's objections seemed smaller when spoken within reach of his silence. "Would you prefer the curtains drawn while they work?" Humphrey asked her. Temperance glanced at the heavy damask. "If Mr. Barlow can inspect masonry through 3 folds of velvet, I shall think Halebury has employed a magician rather than a smith." For one brief moment, surprise warmed Humphrey's face. Then he smiled. It was not the polished smile of a host. It came slowly, as though she had found a door he had forgotten was there. "Open then," he said. "We shall rely upon his lesser talents." The exchange lasted only seconds, but something in Temperance eased. No one had rescued her from embarrassment. No one had praised her courage as though she were a child. He had simply met her wit and allowed it to stand. Outside, boots sounded across the conservatory roof. Mr. Barlow appeared above the window, secured by a rope around his waist, while one of the estate men braced him from behind. He leaned over the parapet and examined the rainspout. "There's a second length here, Your Grace," he called, twisted around the stone bracket. "Can you remove it without altering the end?" "I believe so." The bell stirred as he loosened the wire from above. Humphrey raised one hand to warn everyone back from the glass. Mr. Barlow worked slowly. First the bell descended, turning in the air at the end of its narrow loop. One of the men lowered it toward the sill outside. Barlow then threaded the loop free from the stone and guided the bell onto a square of clean linen, held beneath the open lower pane of an adjoining corridor window. Temperance's casement remained locked. Mrs. Wren went with the dowager to receive it, leaving Temperance's room by the door and returning less than a minute later with H17 resting untouched upon the cloth. The green waxed loop remained threaded through its fastening. "Set it on the table," Humphrey said. "No one removes the wire yet." Mr. Barlow stayed on the roof. He unwound the longer piece from the rain-spout bracket with the flat tips of his pliers, preserving the bent section. It was lowered in the same manner and brought inside on a second cloth. The two wire ends lay several inches apart upon the table. One belonged to the short loop that had held the bell. The other belonged to a longer tail, nearly 9 inches in length, darkened with green wax and grit from the stone. Humphrey looked at Barlow. "Can they be compared without fitting them together by force?" "Yes, Your Grace." The smith bent close without touching either end. "Bring the candles nearer, if you please." Mrs. Wren obeyed. In the brighter light, the break became visible. The shorter end rose in a small hooked angle. The longer piece bore the answering hollow. Barlow turned the cloth beneath the second piece, not the wire itself. "Same break," he said. "One piece before it snapped." Valentine gave a dismissive breath. "Wire is wire." Barlow looked toward him. "Not this wire, sir." Humphrey's gaze remained upon the table. "Explain." Its hand twisted in reverse. Most men in the estate workshops turn with the right hand and lay the strands the other way. This was turned left. There's green wax worked into the twist, likely to quiet the metal against leather. Both pieces carry the same wax. He pointed with the closed end of his pliers. And there. Both were cut from the larger length by a flat-jawed cutter with a nick on one side. It leaves that shallow tooth. Temperance saw it then, a tiny flattened crescent near the unbroken end of each piece. "Could that mark belong to more than one tool?" she asked. Barlow considered before answering. "The sort of mark, yes. That exact nick, less likely. I'd need the original spool and cutter to speak with confidence." Humphrey nodded, apparently satisfied by the caution rather than disappointed by it. "You will not be asked to say more than you know." Matthew's eyes remained fixed on the green wax. Beneath his thumbnail, the dark line Temperance had noticed earlier looked almost the same color. She kept the observation to herself. One mark was not proof, and fear had already made him careless. Diana stepped away from the fire. If Dale recognizes the bell and cannot explain how it came here, surely he should be dismissed before luncheon. Half the county will arrive for the flight. Matthew flinched as though the sentence had struck him. Temperance turned toward Diana. "Recognition is not the same as guilt. You are remarkably charitable toward a man who may have stood above your window. I am being precise." Diana's expression cooled. Precision is a comfortable word when one has nothing to lose. Temperance felt the old impulse to withdraw. She resisted it. "Mr. Dale has employment, a cottage, and a reputation to lose. That may be why he is frightened. It does not tell us whom he fears." Humphrey looked at Matthew. The falconer's face had gone rigid. "Mrs. Foxley is correct," the Duke said. "No dismissal will occur before the facts are examined." Valentine pushed away from the mantel. "And if the facts inconvenience your guests, then my guests will endure inconvenience." Mrs. Wren brought brown paper, linen tape, string, and the Caverton sealing wax. Under Humphrey's direction, Mr. Barlow unthreaded the short loop from H17 without bending it. The bell, the 4-inch loop, and the longer window tail were wrapped in 3 separate packets. Humphrey pressed his signet into each seal. Mrs. Wren recorded the contents and time in the household book, then placed all 3 packets inside a small locked dispatch box. "Take it directly to my study," Humphrey told her. "Put it in the iron cabinet. Keep the key yourself until I ask for it." "Yes, Your Grace." Only after the box had left the room did he approach the casement. He tested the inside catch gently with one finger. It held firm. The bell was lowered from above, he said. The window was never opened. Temperance looked toward the conservatory roofline. Someone had stood there in darkness, almost directly over her bedchamber, trusting height and silence to conceal the act. "Who has access to the roof stair?" she asked. "The housekeeper, the head gardener, the steward, and certain senior servants." Humphrey replied. "The issue book will tell us whether a key was taken." Matthew shifted. Humphrey heard it. "Hatch 18, he said. "Was it paired with hatch 17 when Rook disappeared?" "Yes, Your Grace." "On which Jess?" "The right. H17 was on the left." Temperance pictured the painted tear-cell in the downstairs portrait. 2 bells, 2 straps. 1 bird reported lost. Only 1 bell had returned. A footman appeared at the door, carrying a leather-bound register from the mews. Humphrey opened it upon the writing table. Matthew's entry for the 2nd of October was brief. Rook lost over North Moor. Search unsuccessful. Yet the equipment column beside the entry still listed both bells as attached. H17, H18. Neither had been struck through. Humphrey lifted his eyes to Matthew. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "we will examine every line of this record." Matthew bowed, but the movement looked less like obedience than surrender. Temperance looked once more at the locked casement. Somewhere beyond Halebury Court, H18 had not yet been accounted for. The lie was not in Matthew Dale's sentence. It was in the empty lines beneath it. Temperance saw that before the Duke spoke. The Mews register lay open upon a scarred oak table in the falconry room on the morning of the 19th of October, its pages ruled with the exact habits of a household that believed order could prevent misfortune. Feed, condition, weather, equipment, flight, injury, loss. Each heading had its place. Rook's final entry had only one brief note beneath his name. Lost over North Moor, 2nd October. Search unsuccessful. Matthew stood opposite the table, cap crushed between both hands. The Dowager Duchess sat near the small stove, with her cane resting across her knees, while Mr. Harcourt, the estate steward, examined a second ledger beside Humphrey. Outside, tethered horses stamped in the chill yard. Somewhere deeper in the mews, a hooded tear-cell made a low, impatient sound. "Who wrote this?" Humphrey asked. Matthew did not pretend uncertainty. "I did, Your Grace." "At what hour?" "Near dusk." "After the search?" "Yes." Humphrey placed one finger below the entry. "Where is the search list?" Matthew looked at the page as though an answer might have appeared there overnight. There wasn't one. Mr. Harcourt lifted his head. "Every mounted search beyond the lower fields is logged. Horses, men, lanterns, and return time." "It happened quickly," Matthew said. "I sent whoever was near." "Who was near?" Temperance asked. Matthew turned toward her. His eyes showed the same hunted caution she had seen in the bedchamber. "2 lads, a groom, myself." "Names?" "I don't recall which lads." "You remembered the wind direction," Humphrey said, glancing at the weather column. "Northwest, strong enough to carry a tiercel beyond the ridge." "You remembered the precise hour of release." 4 minutes past 3. "Yet you don't recall the men who searched beside you." Matthew's fingers tightened around his cap. "I wrote the weather because it mattered." Temperance studied him, and the names did not. His gaze moved away from her, past the open doorway, toward a young man in a dark livery coat carrying a bucket across the yard. The groom did not look in. He walked too quickly. Temperance followed him with her eyes until he disappeared behind the stable wall. When she looked back, Humphrey was watching Matthew rather than the doorway. He had noticed the direction of the glance. Mr. Harcourt turned several pages. There is no fee deduction after the second. Rook was gone, Matthew said. Then his ration should have been removed from the daily account. The steward tapped the figures. It continues unchanged for 6 days. An oversight. You have kept these books for 22 years, Humphrey said. Your oversights appear to have begun and ended with Rook. Matthew said nothing. Temperance moved closer to the register without touching it. The equipment column beside Rook's name still listed hood, swivel, jesses, leash, and both numbered bells, H17 and H18. No line had been drawn through them. No notation recorded their loss. There should be a separate equipment entry, she said. Mr. Harcourt nodded. Any item lost in the field is entered for replacement and cost. Especially silver bells, the dowager added. My late husband complained about every one of them. A faint expression passed over Humphrey's face, almost amusement, but it vanished when he looked again at Matthew. Why was no replacement requested? I thought Rook might return. For 16 days, birds have returned after longer, and yet you wrote him off as lost before dusk. Matthew's silence thickened. Valentine Marcham entered the mews without announcement, carrying gloves in one hand and the easy confidence of a man accustomed to being welcomed into rooms where business was already underway. The young groom Temperance had seen crossed behind him, then stopped near the tack room. Still examining old columns? Valentine asked. I had hoped Halebury's morning might contain something more sporting. Humphrey did not close the register. We are discussing Rook. Then you are discussing a bird who flew away. Valentine's tone remained light. Even the finest bloodline cannot teach loyalty to a hawk. Rook did not have a bloodline, Temperance said. He had breeding. Valentine smiled at her. I stand corrected. The words were courteous. The look was not. Humphrey turned a page toward him. You organize the private wagers for the autumn flight. Among a few gentlemen, nothing improper. What changed when Rook disappeared? Valentine drew on one glove, smoothing each finger. The odds. In whose favor? Yours became worse. And yours? Humphrey asked. Valentine's smile held. I'm not certain what you imply. I asked what changed. Several gentlemen had backed Halebury's entry. When Rook was lost, their expectations became less secure, including your own. I keep my sporting accounts private. Mr. Harcourt closed the second ledger. The flight winner's pool is not the only matter. There are side wagers on height, return, and clean obedience. Temperance looked at the steward. Would Rook's absence alter all three? Considerably, he said. Valentine removed his glove again, though he had only just put it on. This is becoming melodramatic. A missing tear-cell is not a financial conspiracy. No one has called it one, Humphrey said. You did that yourself. The young groom shifted near the tack room. Matthew looked at him. It was brief, but this time everyone saw it. Humphrey's voice changed by no more than a degree. Your name. The groom swallowed. Ellis Pike, Your Grace. Who employs you? Mr. Markham, Your Grace. Did you search the North Moor on the 2nd of October? Pike looked first at Valentine. That answer came before the spoken one. No, Your Grace. Matthew closed his eyes. Valentine's expression hardened. My groom has no place in your mews inquiry. Then he will find it easy to remain outside my mews, Humphrey replied. Mr. Harcourt, Mr. Pike is not to enter the falconry yard, equipment room, or north paddock without your written permission. Yes, Your Grace. Pike bowed and withdrew. Valentine's face had lost its polished ease. You overstep. Humphrey looked at him. At Halebury? The question needed no answer. Valentine gave a shallow bow and left by the same doorway, his boots striking hard against the stones. Only when he was gone did Matthew speak. I made the entry. That has already been established, Humphrey said. Did Rook fly beyond the ridge? Matthew stared at the table. I saw him go north. That is not what I asked, Temperance said quietly. He looked at her. You answered where you saw him move. His Grace asked whether he escaped beyond the ridge. The room seemed to narrow around the falconer. I don't know what happened after he crossed the lower rise. Humphrey's gaze sharpened. That is the first precise answer you have given. Matthew's breathing became uneven. Dismiss me then. Do you want dismissal? Humphrey asked. No. The word broke from him. Then why offer it? Matthew's face tightened with shame. Because I've failed you. Perhaps, Humphrey said, but failure is not always the same thing as guilt. Temperance glanced at him. He had taken her distinction from the bedchamber and made it his own without claiming it. Matthew lowered his head. I can't say more. Can I not? Temperance asked, or will not? His eyes lifted to hers. Fear answered. She turned to Humphrey. If he is dismissed now, whoever controls that fear will have no reason to loosen it. Mr. Harcourt frowned. He falsified a record. Yes, that must have consequence, but consequence before truth may only remove the witness. Humphrey considered her in silence. You notice, when a man answers the question he wishes had been asked. People often reveal more by avoidance than confession. Will you continue to observe with us? The request was formal enough for the others, but his eyes made it personal. Temperance did not answer at once. I will not become a hidden informant in another person's household. Nor would I ask it. And I will not carry private suspicions that may later be used as though I made accusations. Anything you observe will be examined openly. She held his gaze. Then yes, something settled between them. Not intimacy. Not yet. It was a narrower bridge, built from terms clearly stated and accepted. Humphrey turned back to Matthew. You remain in your post for now. You will not alter a register, remove equipment, or leave the estate without permission. Mr. Harcourt will hold the mews keys except during supervised work. Matthew bowed. Relief did not reach his face, but despair loosened its grip. The dowager rose with care. We have learned that Rook's disappearance was poorly recorded, financially useful to someone, and surrounded by fear. That is enough for one morning. Temperance looked once more toward the yard where Pike had vanished. A memory stirred. Iron wheels over wet stone, a covered crate, one faint metallic note beneath the hiss of steam. There may be something else, she said. Humphrey turned. What? 3 days ago, at the York goods yard, I heard a hawk bell inside a covered animal crate. Matthew's cap slipped from his hands and fell to the floor. Matthew's cap struck the stone floor, but no one bent to retrieve it. The sound was dull beside the memory. Temperance had just placed among them iron wheels, steam, a covered crate, and one faint metallic note. Humphrey closed the mews register without removing his hand from it. Begin at the station, he said. Tell us only what you saw and heard. It was the 20th of October by the time they assembled, again in the smaller falconry room, where the air smelled of leather, clean straw, and the cold mineral damp of the yard. Mrs. Wren had brought the sealed packet containing H17 from the iron cabinet in Humphrey's study. The Dowager Duchess sat beside the stove. Matthew stood near the equipment wall, while Mr. Harcourt remained at the door with the register under his arm. Diana had insisted upon attending, though she had taken a chair as far from the work table as possible. Valentine had not been invited. Temperance rested both hands upon the back of an empty chair. "I arrived at York on the 15th, she said. The train from London was late enough that the goods yard was crowded. There were poultry baskets, 2 hunting dogs, and several wooden crates waiting for carts. One crate was covered with dark cloth and carried separately. Humphrey's gaze did not leave her face. What made you notice it? The man handling it told a porter not to set it near the dogs. He said the animal inside was easily distressed. The crate was long, but not high enough for a large dog. There were air holes along one side. Did you see the man clearly? Mr. Harcourt asked. Not his face. He wore a brown coat and stood with his back to me. I saw the cart. Diana shifted. Half the carts in Yorkshire look alike. Temperance turned toward her. This one bore Mr. Marcham's travelling crest on the door panel. Diana's expression remained composed, but the fingers resting upon her skirt tightened. Valentine lends his dog-cart to friends. Perhaps, Temperance said. I did not claim otherwise. Humphrey glanced toward Diana. Let Mrs. Foxley complete her account. Temperance continued. As the crate was lifted, something moved inside. I heard a bell once. Matthew's face had become still. Only once, he asked. Yes. High or low? Higher than H17. Diana gave a soft sigh. You cannot know that. You heard the bell outside your window only once in darkness, and now you are arranging memories to suit what has happened since. The sentence entered Temperance with the old familiar precision of a needle. Her late husband had spoken in that same measured way whenever she noticed a servant's distress, an unpaid bill hidden beneath a blotter, or a change in his voice before an unkind remark. You are arranging things, Temperance. You are too eager to find meaning. She had once apologized for seeing what later proved true. She had apologized even when he never did. Humphrey did not answer Diana for her. Instead, he asked, Mrs. Foxley, how certain are you? Temperance looked at him. There was no pressure in the question, only room for an honest measure. Certain that I heard a hawk bell. Certain that it was higher than the one at my window. Less certain that the crate held rook, because I did not see the bird. That is precise enough. The words steadied her more than praise would have. Humphrey nodded to Mrs. Wren. The housekeeper broke the outer seal of H17's packet under the observation of everyone present. She did not touch the bell with her bare hand. She lifted it by its jess, fastening with a narrow leather strap, and placed it upon clean linen. The short wire loop and the longer window tail remained sealed separately in the study cabinet. Matthew crossed to a shallow cabinet and removed 6 numbered bells from the current equipment set. He arranged them upon the table in no obvious order. They don't all sound alike, he said. Weight, clapper, wear, and repair alter them. Can H17 be sounded without damaging it? Humphrey asked. Matthew nodded. Once. Lightly, Mrs. Wren held the leather strap while Matthew touched the bell against a small horn handle. A clear silver note rose between them, bright at first, then roughened at the end by a faint unevenness. Temperance felt recognition move through her before she could name it. The last edge catches, she said. Matthew stared at her. The clapper was filed. Why? It struck too heavily after a repair. I filed one side to soften it. Humphrey indicated the other bells. Sound them. Matthew did so one by one. Some notes were deeper, one almost dull, too sharp and brief. Temperance listened with her eyes lowered. Humphrey stood beside her, near enough that the sleeve of his coat entered the edge of her vision. Their shoulders almost touched when he leaned slightly toward the table. But he did not claim the space between them. The quiet felt different from silence beside her husband. It asked nothing of her. Matthew sounded the 5th bell. Temperance shook her head. Lower. The 6th gave a brighter note, clean and even. Closer, but not the same. Humphrey looked at Matthew. Where is H18 in this set? It isn't here, Your Grace. It disappeared with Rook. How did it sound? Temperance asked. Matthew rubbed his thumb against the seam of his coat. Higher than H17. Same maker, same repair. The clapper was filed on the opposite side, so the note rose clean, then caught at the finish. The yard seemed to fall away. Temperance heard again the hiss of steam at York, the porter's complaint, the dark cloth shifting over the crate. One silver note had slipped through the noise, higher than the bell at her window, clean at first, then caught. That is what I heard, she said. Diana rose. This is absurd. No one can identify a single bell after days have passed. Temperance turned to her. I told you about it before the bell appeared outside my room. The room changed. Humphrey's eyes sharpened. You told Lady Diana on the evening of my arrival. She asked why I had delayed near the goods yard. I said I had heard a hawk bell in a covered crate attached to Mr. Marcham's cart. Diana's face lost a little colour. You mentioned a noise. You did not declare that Valentine was transporting a stolen tearcell. I did not know a tearcell was missing, and now you find the memory convenient. Temperance felt the old pressure to soften, to retreat, into uncertainty, so that another woman's comfort might remain intact. She looked at H17 resting upon the linen. Then she lifted her head. I heard what I heard. No one spoke for several seconds. Humphrey's voice, when it came, was quiet. And because you spoke of it before this inquiry began, the timing matters. Diana's chin rose. You cannot mean to treat casual conversation as evidence. I mean to treat prior knowledge as relevant. He turned to Matthew. Were H17 and H18 repaired together? Yes, Your Grace. Could a person familiar with the pair distinguish them? Yes. Could Mrs. Foxley have known H18's sound before the 15th? Matthew looked at her, then at the bell. Not unless she'd heard Rook before, and she hadn't. Temperance noticed that he did not say the bird was dead. Humphrey noticed too. Then Rook was alive on the 15th, he said, or someone transported his bell separately in a covered animal crate. Mr. Harcourt opened the register again. Either possibility contradicts the loss entry. Matthew's face tightened. Diana moved toward the door. I will not remain while suspicion is made fashionable. Humphrey did not stop her. You may go. She paused, perhaps expecting apology. None came. When the door closed behind her, the room seemed to breathe. Mrs. Wren carefully returned 17 to its linen, wrapped it again, and pressed fresh Caverton wax across the packet. She recorded the broken and renewed seal in the household book before carrying it back toward the study. Temperance remained beside the table. Humphrey did not look at the departing packet. He looked at her. Did your husband often doubt you? The question was so gently asked that it reached farther than she intended. He preferred conclusions that did not inconvenience him. Humphrey's mouth tightened, not in pity, but in restrained anger on behalf of something already done. And you learned to question yourself. I learned to present certainty as apology. You did not do so today. No. Their shoulders were still nearly aligned. Neither moved closer. Neither stepped away. Good, he said. Matthew drew a breath behind them. There's an old road from the north gate, he murmured. Humphrey turned. Where does it lead? To the abandoned signal hut above the lower moor. Mr. Harcourt frowned. No one uses it now. Matthew looked toward the yard, toward the direction Ellis Pike had gone the day before. A narrow dog-cart could. The old road began beyond Halebury's north gate, as two pale tracks pressed through wet heather, narrow enough for a dog-cart, and too neglected for the estate carriages used by guests. By mid-morning on the 21st of October, a groom had harnessed a steady bay to a low pony trap, and Mr. Harcourt sat forward beside the reins, while Humphrey and Temperance occupied the rear bench. The Dowager Duchess had declared the road unsuitable for her knee and unsuitable for anyone's patience. Matthew remained at the mews under supervision. He had given them the direction, then retreated into the same guarded silence that had followed his mention of the signal hut. The trap jolted over ruts hardened by old wheels. Wind moved across the moor in long, cold breaths, carrying the scent of damp earth and bracken. Temperance held the side rail rather than accept the leather strap fixed above it. She preferred knowing exactly what supported her. Humphrey sat close enough to steady her if the wheel struck badly, but he did not place a hand upon her without cause. "You have been quiet since we left the gate," he said. "I am counting turns." "For what purpose?" "To know whether the cart I saw at York could have reached the hut without passing the house." Mr. Harcourt glanced back with interest. "It could have come through the north gate. The lodgekeeper's room has been empty since his wife took ill." "How long?" Temperance asked. 3 weeks. Humphrey looked toward the road ahead. Long enough. They passed an abandoned stone marker half sunk in grass, then descended into a hollow where the house vanished from sight. Temperance counted 7 more bends before a blackened roof appeared above the heather. The signal hut had once served men watching estate fires and lost travellers on the high ground. Now one shutter hung crooked, and moss filled the joints of the low stone walls. Nothing about it suggested recent use until Mr. Harcourt pulled the pony to a halt. The drinking trough beside the hut was dry, but the smaller basin beneath the eaves held clear water. "Rain?" Humphrey asked. The steward bent over it. "Not beneath that overhang." A square of disturbed mud lay near the door. One print had been blurred by yesterday's drizzle, but the iron edge of a narrow wheel remained visible. Temperance stepped down after Mr. Harcourt. The ground was lower than she expected. Her boot slipped half an inch on the wet stone. Humphrey stood below and offered his hand. He did not reach for her. He simply waited. Temperance placed her gloved fingers in his palm. His grip closed with measured firmness, warm even through the leather, and she descended without haste. For one beat after both her feet were secure, neither released the other. The contact was not necessary then. That made her aware of it. She withdrew first. Humphrey's eyes met hers, calm and unreadable except for the faint softening at their edges. "The road is less civilized than the house," he said. "The house has had more practice concealing it." His mouth almost curved, a severe judgment after only 4 days. "I have seen enough houses to know that polished floors are not evidence of innocence." Mr. Harcourt pretended to examine the latch. The hut door opened without a key. Inside, the air carried a sour mineral odor beneath the smell of old wood. Temperance stopped on the threshold. A wild bird might shelter in such a place, but a trained bird would leave signs of human order. She saw them almost at once. The pan, she said, a shallow metal vessel, stood beneath the broken shutter. Its rim was wiped clean, unlike the dust around it. Near the opposite wall, a wooden perch bore fresh scoring where leather had rubbed the grain. Humphrey entered after Mr. Harcourt and crouched beside the floor without touching it. White droppings had dried near the perch, too fresh to belong to some forgotten season. Beside them lay one cast feather, grey-barred and sharply pointed. "Peregrine," he said. Temperance looked at him. "Tiercel? Likely. Smaller than a falcon's primary." Mr. Harcourt opened a cupboard built into the wall, empty. On the adjacent beam, 6 iron pegs remained. 5 held cracked straps and old rope. The 6th was bare, though the dust around it preserved the shape of something recently removed. A small brass plate beneath the peg bore the faded caverton mark. "Estate equipment was stored here once," the steward said. Humphrey studied the bare outline. What shape was removed? Temperance stepped nearer. 2 curved impressions marked the dust with a narrow central line between them. A lure folded over the peg. Mr. Harcourt nodded. Red and white, if it came from the old mews stock. The signalling lures were made visible against dark ground. Would a poacher use one? Temperance asked. "A poacher might use anything he stole," a voice said from the doorway. Valentine Marcham stood outside with Ellis Pike behind him holding 2 horses. Valentine's boots were clean enough to prove he had not followed on foot. "I heard your grace had gone exploring." "I thought you might require assistance." Humphrey rose. "From a man whose groom has been barred from the mews? Pike is barred from the yard. The North Moor is not the yard. It is still Halebury." Valentine's smile remained, though effort showed at its edges. He glanced around the hut, a feather, a basin, and old leather marks. "You have found what any poacher's shelter might contain." Temperance looked down at the workbench beneath the shutter. Green flecks clung to a split in the wood. She bent closer without touching them. "Wax." Humphrey came beside her. "The same color, it appears so. That must be tested." Valentine gave a low laugh. "Mrs. Foxley sees conspiracy in every scrap." Temperance straightened. "No, I see green wax in a hut reached by your dog-cart beside a perch used recently by a trained bird. You cannot know my cart came here. I know a narrow cart did, and the feather proves nothing. It proves a peregrine was here. Wild birds exist, even in Yorkshire." Temperance pointed toward the clean pan. "Wild birds do not wash their drinking vessels." Mr. Harcourt's mouth twitched. Humphrey did not smile. He faced Valentine fully. "Answer the evidence, not the sex of the person describing it." Valentine's expression chilled. "I merely suggest proportion. Then begin with your own." Silence followed. Ellis Pike looked toward the open road, then toward the hut floor. Temperance noticed a cluster of pale straw beneath the bench. It was not moor grass. The cut ends were square, and a torn strip of paper clung to one bundle. Mr. Harcourt lifted the paper with the point of his pencil. Blue printed letters remained across it. York and North Midland Freight. "Packing straw," he said, "from the goods yard." Humphrey looked at Pike. The groom's face closed. Valentine spoke before he could. "Freight straw travels. It might have been here for years." Temperance crouched near it, careful not to disturb the arrangement. The straw was pale within and dark only at the surface. Not years. The inner stems are not brittle. Humphrey followed her reasoning aloud, not as correction but confirmation. "A crate came from York. A tiercel was held here. A caverton lure was removed. Green wax was used at the workbench." He turned toward the empty peg, "and someone expected to need the bird again." Valentine's gaze sharpened. "That is imagination dressed as sequence." "Then offer a better sequence," Temperance said. He looked at her with open dislike now. "You are remarkably bold for a woman here only by Lady Diana's. Kindness. Kindness is not ownership." Humphrey's attention shifted between them, and something in his face warned Valentine not to continue. "Mr. Harcourt placed the feather. wax flakes, and freight paper fragment into separate folded papers, marking each with the location and hour. The pan remained where it was. The perch and empty peg were sketched in the steward's notebook. They found no bird, no wire spool, and no lure. Absence mattered because it had shape. On the return journey, Humphrey spoke little. The pony trap climbed out of the hollow, and the wind pressed Temperance's bonnet ribbons against her cheek. She had not realized how tense she was until Halebury Court appeared again, beyond the trees. Diana waited at the north steps in a dark green riding habit, one hand resting upon her crop. Valentine had ridden ahead. I trust the expedition did not uncover another object to alarm the household, she said. It uncovered evidence that Rook was confined at the signal hut, Humphrey replied. Diana's gaze flicked toward Temperance. Then tomorrow's flight should be cancelled. For a heartbeat, Temperance thought she heard relief. Diana corrected it at once, but cancellation would invite gossip. The county guests are already arriving. We shall proceed on the 23rd as planned. Humphrey descended from the trap with a substitute tear cell. Of course. Diana looked at Temperance's plain travelling coat. Mrs. Foxley will attend beside me. She may carry my field glass and reticule. Temperance met her eyes. The request sounded ordinary. After the hut, nothing about it felt ordinary at all. At dawn on the 22nd of October, the substitute Tiercel refused the Duke of Halebury twice. The first time, the bird rose from Matthew Dale's glove, circled above the lower meadow, and ignored the whistle that summoned him back. The second time, he passed over the lure as though it were an insult. Humphrey stood in the pale grass with one gloved hand raised and the other resting at his side, his expression composed enough to fool anyone who did not know how much authority he carried into every room. Temperance knew now that he disliked being obeyed poorly almost as much as he disliked being obeyed for the wrong reason. The mews yard behind them remained quiet. Matthew had been permitted to supervise the equipment, but not the keys, and Mr. Harcourt watched from the gate while two grooms held the horses. No guests had yet come down from the house. Beyond the low wall, mist lay over the Yorkshire fields, turning the hedges into dark islands. Humphrey sounded the whistle again. The tiercel settled upon an ash branch and looked elsewhere. "He has made his opinion plain," Temperance said. Humphrey lowered his arm. "That I lack charm? That you are using the wrong argument?" I had not realized a hawk required rhetoric. He requires repetition. She nodded toward the red lure lying in the grass. "And trust." Matthew glanced at her, then quickly away. Humphrey followed her gaze. "He knows the lure. He knows the man who usually swings it, the pace of the movement, and the reward that follows. A bird does not return because a duke has called." Humphrey looked at her with a faint narrowing of his eyes. An inconvenient principle. Only for dukes. That slow smile appeared again. "You are determined to reduce the dignity of my station before breakfast." "I am trying to improve your falconry." He lifted the lure from the grass and handed it to Matthew. "Show me." Matthew hesitated. His hands had been steadier since the visit to the signal hut, though fear still entered every silence in which Valentine's name might have appeared. He stepped into the field, swung the lure in a low, familiar arc, and gave a softer call. The tiercel left the branch at once. He descended cleanly, turned above the grass, and came to Matthew's glove after the reward was shown. Humphrey watched the bird settle. "So much for rank. Rank may provide the field," Temperance said. "It cannot compel the return." Something changed in his expression. The jest remained, but beneath it came recognition of a meaning neither of them needed to explain fully. You speak as though birds are wiser than men. They are more honest about what earns their trust. Matthew busied himself with the hood. Mr. Harcourt turned toward the gate to speak with a groom. For a moment, the space around Temperance and Humphrey seemed private despite the open field. Humphrey looked toward the tiercel, then back at her. I am accustomed to command producing movement. His voice was quieter now. Doors open. Horses are brought. Men answer. And women? The question escaped before she could soften it. He did not take offense. Often they answer what they believe I expect. Temperance thought of her late husband, who had demanded agreement and called it harmony. That is not the same as truth. No. Humphrey looked at the mist beyond the hedges. It is not. Matthew returned carrying a second gauntlet smaller than Humphrey's, but still broad enough to cover a woman's forearm. For Mrs. Foxley, your grace, he said, if she is to stand near the observation line tomorrow. Temperance looked at him. I am to stand near it? Humphrey took the gauntlet from Matthew. Only if you choose. The county guests will be placed beyond the white stakes. You would remain with my mother and Lady Diana, well outside the direct launch path. Lady Diana has assigned me her field glass and reticule. Lady Diana does not assign positions on my flight ground. The words were firm, but his attention stayed on Temperance. I would prefer you near enough to observe. I would also prefer you safe. Those preferences may conflict. Then yours will decide. The answer came without hesitation. Temperance extended her left arm. The leather gauntlet was lined with wool and fastened by 2 narrow straps. Humphrey slid it carefully over her hand, then stopped before touching the buckle. His eyes lifted to hers. May I? The question was simple. It carried more weight than it should have. Her husband had seldom asked before arranging her clothing, moving her chair, correcting her words, or deciding which discomforts she ought to endure quietly. Temperance felt the old instinct to make the moment smaller. Instead, she held Humphrey's gaze. Yes. His fingers closed around the first strap. Even through the leather, she felt the measured pressure of his hand at her forearm. He tightened the buckle, tested the fit, then adjusted the second strap with deliberate care. There was nothing improper in the act. Matthew and the steward stood within sight, yet the touch was more intimate than any accidental brush in a crowded drawing room, because he had asked and she had answered. Too tight, he said. No, you should be able to turn the wrist. She did. Like this? Yes. His hand remained for one breath against the outer leather. Then he released her. Temperance lowered her arm slowly. The gauntlet felt heavier than it had before he fastened it. Across the field, a movement near the terrace caught her eye. Diana stood beneath the stone arch leading from the house, dressed for the morning in dark green, one hand resting upon the edge of the balustrade. She was too far away to have heard them, but not too far to have seen Humphrey's attention. Her face revealed nothing. Valentine appeared beside her a moment later. He said something low. Diana turned toward him, and the two withdrew together. Humphrey had seen them as well. They are early, Temperance said. They are rarely early without purpose. His tone held no humor now. Matthew lifted the hooded tiercel. Tomorrow's substitute will need rest. Humphrey nodded. No further flight today, Mr. Harcourt. Double the watch at the Mews and North Gate. Yes, Your Grace. No bird leaves without your signature and mine. Matthew's mouth tightened. Rook may still be alive. I believe he is, Temperance said. The falconer looked at her with something close to pain. Then pray he is not made to pay for our mistakes." Before she could ask what he meant, he turned away with the bird. Later that afternoon, Halebury Court filled with arriving guests, servants carrying valises, and gentlemen discussing wind as if they had arranged it personally. Temperance stood in Diana's dressing room while a maid folded shawls for the following day. Diana sat before the mirror, sorting gloves with perfect composure. On the table lay the field glass, a dark reticule, and a riding crop. "You will carry these tomorrow," Diana said. "Stay on my left. Do not wander toward His Grace, simply because he has shown interest in your observations." Temperance met her eyes in the mirror. His Grace has shown interest in facts, a distinction lonely women often find comforting. Temperance did not answer. Diana rose and crossed to a cabinet near the window. She opened it only wide enough to conceal what her hands were doing. Temperance heard a faint scrape, then the whisper of something being cut. When Diana turned back, she held only a folded scarf. "Your cloak sits unevenly," she said. "Come here." Temperance remained still. "My cloak is in my room. Then bring it before dinner. Tomorrow must look orderly." The maid entered with fresh ribbons, and Diana's smile returned. Temperance left soon after, carrying neither field glass nor reticule. Behind the closed door, Diana waited until the maid turned toward the wardrobe. Then she drew a red and white strip from her sleeve, wrapped 3 inches of green waxed wire around one end, and slipped it beneath the clasp of the reticule. Temperance would be ordered to carry. By 11 o'clock on the 23rd of October, the lower lawn at Halebury had become a theatre of coloured coats, polished boots, and expectant faces. Gentlemen stood beyond the white stakes with field glasses raised. Ladies gathered beneath striped awnings, their voices bright with the pleasure of being present before anything had yet happened. The substitute Tiercel waited hooded upon Matthew Dale's glove, restless but sound. Mr. Harcourt stood near the mews gate with the steward's keys at his belt, while 2 estate men watched the north path as Humphrey had ordered. Temperance remained at Lady Diana's left, carrying the field glass and dark reticule. The falconry gauntlet Humphrey had fitted the day before covered her left forearm. Diana had insisted upon arranging her cloak before they left the house, smoothing the front with quick, cool hands and fastening the reticule strap over Temperance's wrist. Nothing about the gesture had seemed openly improper. That made Temperance distrust it more. Humphrey crossed the lawn toward the flight line, stopping once to exchange a few words with the independent gentleman invited to observe the handling. He looked composed, but Temperance saw the tension in the angle of his shoulders. When his gaze found hers, he did not smile. He inclined his head once, a silent question. She answered with the same. She was ready. Matthew removed the substitute Tiercel's hood. The bird blinked into the pale autumn light, then settled as the leather jesses were checked. Humphrey gave the signal. Matthew launched him cleanly. The Tiercel climbed above the lawn, took the wind and turned toward the west lure. A murmur of approval moved through the guests. For several moments, the demonstration proceeded exactly as arranged. Then a second shadow crossed the grass. Temperance looked north. A peregrine rose from beyond the copse, lower than the first bird and flying hard toward the lawn. One silver note sounded above the voices, higher than H17, clean at first, then catching faintly at the finish. Her breath stopped. "Rook," Matthew said. The word barely left him. The arriving Tiercel banked once over the white stakes. Sunlight struck the bell at his right jess. H18 flashed beneath him. Guests began shouting questions. The substitute bird veered away from the disturbance, and Matthew called to the assistant falconer to recover him. Rook did not look toward Matthew. He looked toward Temperance. She felt movement at her wrist. The reticule swung against her skirt. Something red and white fluttered beneath it, fastened by a short length of green waxed wire. Rook folded into a descending turn. "Stand back," Humphrey ordered. The crowd recoiled unevenly. A lady cried out. One gentleman ducked, though the bird remained well above him. Temperance saw the line of Rook's approach and understood before anyone reached her. He was not coming for her face or shoulder. He was following the strip. "The gauntlet," Matthew called. "Raise it, ma'am." Temperance planted her feet, lifted her left arm, and turned the leather outward as she had seen Matthew do. Rook came down with frightening speed, checked himself above the grass, and landed upon the gauntlet with a force that drove her elbow toward her side. His talons closed upon the thick leather. His wings beat once, twice, then folded. Temperance held still. The bell at his jess rang again, close enough for her to hear the uneven finish. H18. Rook's breast moved rapidly. He looked thin beneath the feathers, but alive. "Do not crowd him," she said. Her voice carried farther than she expected. Humphrey reached her first, but stopped beyond the sweep of the bird's wings. "Are you hurt?" "No." She kept her gaze on Rook. He followed the strip beneath the reticule. Diana stepped forward from the awning. "What strip?" The question was too quick. Temperance looked down. Red and white material hung from a wire loop fixed beneath the reticule clasp. Diana's hand flew to her mouth with perfect delay. "That is a lure." The guests fell silent. Valentine came through the group from the north side of the lawn, Ellis Pike several yards behind him. "A Caverton lure," he said, "or part of one." Matthew's face had gone grey. The old signal lure was red and white. Diana stared at Temperance as though horror had only now found its object. "You had that beneath my reticule?" "Your reticule was fastened by your hand," Temperance said, "because you asked me to carry it." A ripple moved through the ladies. Diana's expression sharpened beneath its mask of shock. "Are you suggesting I placed it there?" "I am stating who handled it last." Valentine gave a short laugh. "Convenient, Mrs. Foxley hears a bell at York, discovers a mysterious bell at her window, and now the missing bird flies directly to her arm. How much preparation must society witness before we call design by its name?" Temperance felt every eye upon her. She knew what they saw. A widow of uncertain standing, a duke's attention, a supposedly lost tiercel perched upon her glove, a lure fixed to the reticule she carried. The arrangement was so neat that truth seemed clumsy beside it. Diana turned to Humphrey. She must have hidden Rook. She knew the bird would return. "I have never handled him before this moment," Temperance said. "Yet he chose you," Valentine replied. Rook shifted upon the gauntlet. Temperance steadied her arm. "He chose the lure, a lure you possess. A lure someone attached to Lady Diana's reticule." Humphrey lifted one hand. The murmurs ceased. He looked first at Rook, then at the strip, then at Temperance. His face revealed nothing, but his voice was controlled. "Mrs. Foxley, step indoors until the lawn is cleared." The words struck harder than Valentine's accusation. Indoors, removed from the evidence, removed from the room where others would decide what had happened. For one sharp instant, the memory of her locked window returned, along with every quiet instruction that had once displaced her from her own certainty. Temperance met Humphrey's eyes. "No." A few guests shifted in surprise. Humphrey's jaw tightened. "The bird may become unsettled. Then bring Matthew to take him." but I will not leave while the reticule, the strip, and the wire can be handled without me." Silence stretched between them. Temperance saw the moment his first instinct met what she had already taught him. Protection could become removal. Rank could move a person without earning trust. His expression changed, not softened, corrected. "You are right," he said before everyone. He turned to Matthew. "Approach slowly. Take Rook when Mrs. Foxley gives permission." Matthew came forward with a second glove and a small reward. Temperance waited until Rook's attention shifted, then lowered her arm as instructed. The Tearcell stepped to Matthew's glove. Relief moved through her muscles, but she did not let it show. Humphrey faced her again. "What do you need?" It was the question he should have asked first. The fact that he asked it now, publicly and without excuse, mattered. "A clean cloth beneath the reticule," she said. "Mrs. Wren and Mr. Harcourt as witnesses. No one is to cut the wire until Mr. Barlow sees the fastening. The strip, the wire, and the reticule must be wrapped separately after removal. Record who touches each one." Humphrey repeated the orders at once. Mrs. Wren came from the awning carrying linen. Mr. Harcourt opened his notebook. Mr. Barlow, summoned from the stable yard, bent over the reticule without disturbing the clasp. 3 inches of green waxed wire, he said. "Reverse twist." A murmur rose again. "The same sort as the window?" Humphrey asked. "It appears so, Your Grace. I'll say more after comparison." Temperance placed the reticule upon the linen herself. Beneath its clasp, the wire had pierced the leather once, leaving a small, dark puncture. The red and white strip showed a torn edge, not a cut one. "Seal all 3, she said. Diana stepped back. "This is grotesque. She is directing her own exoneration." Temperance looked at her. "I am preserving the evidence of my accusation." Humphrey stood beside the table, not in front of her, and no one will interfere. Across the lawn, Ellis Pike turned toward the north copse as if measuring the distance to escape. Matthew saw him. So did Temperance. Rook's H-18 bell sounded once more from the falconer's glove, and this time the note did not accuse her. It pointed north. By the morning of the 24th of October, Lady Diana had already composed the lie she expected Temperance to support. She delivered it in the blue drawing-room at Halebury Court, where the curtains had been opened upon a bright, cold sky, and a coal fire burned with the neatness of something arranged for witnesses. The Dowager Duchess sat near the window with unopened correspondence upon her lap. Mrs. Wren stood beside the tea-table. Humphrey had not yet entered. Diana remained before the hearth in a pearl-grey dress. Her posture so composed that no stranger would have guessed she had accused another woman of hiding a stolen tiercel less than a day earlier. "We needn't prolong an unfortunate misunderstanding," she said. "The lure strip was likely caught beneath my reticule before we left the house. You carried it without noticing. Rook followed it. Society enjoys a mystery, but it tires quickly when sensible people refuse to feed one." Temperance stood opposite her. She had slept little. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Rook descending toward her, the red and white strip moving beneath her wrist, and Humphrey asking her to go indoors before correcting himself in front of everyone. The sealed reticule, wire, and lure fragment now rested in the steward's locked cabinet. H-17 and the 2 window wire pieces remained separately wrapped in the iron cabinet in Humphrey's study under Mrs. Wren's recorded custody. No object had disappeared. No explanation had yet made them innocent of design. "You accused me of concealing Rook," Temperance said, "before the entire flight party." Diana gave a slight shrug. "I was alarmed. Anyone would have been. The bird flew directly to you. Because a lure strip had been attached beneath your reticule, which you carried. At your insistence. Diana's eyes cooled. Take care. You are here under my protection. The words settled more heavily than the accusation had. Protection. It was the polished name given to dependence when the powerful wished gratitude to survive humiliation. Temperance looked toward the Dowager Duchess. Her grace did not interrupt. She watched with a grave stillness that left the choice where it belonged. Diana continued. You will remain as my chaperone. At breakfast, you will say, the matter has been exaggerated. You will express confidence that no one acted with malice. I will say I regret speaking hastily. The county will accept it. And the wire? A coincidence. The bell outside my locked window, a servant's prank. Rook's false loss entry, Mr. Dale's incompetence. The crate at York. Diana's mouth tightened. A widow's mistaken memory. Temperance felt something inside her become very quiet. It was not surrender. It was the absence of the old need to persuade a person determined not to hear. No, she said. Diana stared at her. What did you say? I will not lend my name to your respectability while you use mine as a shield. The Dowager's fingers closed gently around the edge of her letters. Mrs. Wren lowered her eyes, though not before Temperance saw approval there. Diana stepped forward. You have no household of your own, no father, husband, or brother to receive you. Do you imagine His Grace's interest will survive scandal? Temperance did not flinch. His Grace's interest is not the question. It is the only reason you dare speak so. No, I dare, because yesterday I stood before half the county, with a bird on my arm and evidence tied beneath my wrist. I did not collapse then. I shall not become obedient now merely because the room is smaller. Diana's face sharpened. Without me, you are a widow with a modest income and very little consequence. Then that is what I shall be. Humphrey entered as the last words fell. He stopped just inside the door, taking in Diana's anger, Temperance's stillness, and the Dowager's attentive silence. What has been decided? He asked. Diana turned to him at once. Mrs. Foxley is distressed. I have offered a sensible explanation, but she insists upon turning this unpleasantness into a campaign against me. Temperance faced him. I have ended my service as Lady Diana's chaperone. Diana gave a brittle laugh. Service? You were treated as family. Family does not require a woman to deny what she knows, so that another may remain comfortable. Humphrey's gaze held Temperance's. Is this your free decision? Yes. Then it will be respected. Diana went pale. You cannot mean to encourage this. Mrs. Foxley does not require encouragement to make a decision about her own position. The Dowager Duchess set aside her correspondence. The Dower House has 3 prepared rooms and a competent staff. Mrs. Foxley may stay with me as my guest for as long as she chooses. Temperance looked at her. Your Grace, I do not wish to create difficulty. My dear, difficulty arrived before breakfast yesterday and hung itself outside your window. You did not create it. Diana's composure fractured for 1 second. Very well, let her go. But society will draw its own conclusion. Society usually does, the Dowager said. It is not always worth admiring for the result. By noon, Temperance's trunks had been moved the short distance to the Dower House. She travelled in the Dowager's carriage with Mrs. Wren beside her, while Diana remained at Halebury Court among guests already whispering that the lonely widow had trained Rook to secure a duke's attention. The story reached York that afternoon through a departing gentleman's servant. By evening, a London correspondent had been promised a more entertaining version. Humphrey came to the dower house during the proper morning hour the next day. The dowager occupied the adjoining room with her accounts, the connecting door left open. Temperance received him in a small parlour overlooking bare rose beds. He remained standing until she invited him to sit. "I can issue a statement," he said. "My name will stop some of the gossip. It may stop people from speaking where you can hear them. That is not the same thing." "No." His expression tightened. "I believe you." The words were quiet, stripped of ceremony. Temperance looked down at her folded hands. "That matters more than I wish it did." Humphrey did not seize upon the admission. He waited. She raised her eyes. "But your belief cannot become the evidence. If you declare me innocent, people will say affection has purchased my credibility. And if I remain silent, they will say I doubt you. Then do neither. Preserve the objects. Protect the witnesses. Let the facts speak where your rank cannot." He considered her for a long moment. "You ask a duke to make himself less useful. I ask a man to be useful in the right way." A faint warmth entered his eyes. "That distinction may save me from several bad habits." She almost smiled. "One should not expect reform before luncheon." "Cruel, Mrs. Foxley." "Precise, Your Grace." The exchange softened the room, but neither mistook it for resolution. Humphrey leaned forward slightly. "What do you need next?" The sealed lure strip examined beside the window wire. "Mr. Barlow and Mr. Harcourt present, Mrs. Wren must bring the packets and record every broken seal." "Today?" "Yes. May I continue to call here?" The question touched her more deeply than the offer of a public declaration. He was not assuming access because he had provided safety. "During proper hours," she said, "and only if you come to listen as well as report. I can promise the first. I am learning the second." That afternoon, in the dower house dining room, cleared for examination, Mrs. Wren placed the sealed lure strip and reticule wire beside the separately sealed window tail. Mr. Barlow opened each packet under witness, using clean linen and no bare hand. He examined the 3-inch reticule fragment first, then the longer wire recovered from the rainspout. "Same reverse twist," he said. "Same green wax pressed into the strands." He turned both cloths toward the light, and the cutter mark is alike. "The same shallow nick on one jaw, Mr. Harcourt recorded every word." Humphrey looked at Temperance, but he did not announce what the finding proved. He let her speak. "Then the wire at my window and the wire beneath Lady Diana's reticule came from the same source." Mr. Barlow nodded. "That is my opinion." Temperance looked at the sealed red and white strip waiting beside them. The warning at her window and the accusation on the lawn were no longer separate events. Someone had tried first to frighten her into silence. When that failed, they had tried to make silence unnecessary by destroying her name. The proof would fail unless Humphrey agreed to surrender control of it. Temperance said so in the dower house parlour on the afternoon of the 25th of October, after Mrs. Wren had resealed the window wire, the reticule fragment, and the red and white strip in separate packets, and returned them to their recorded custody. The Dowager Duchess sat in the adjoining morning room with the connecting door open, turning pages of an account book slowly enough to make clear that she was present for propriety and not for interruption. Humphrey stood beside the writing desk, reading the conditions Temperance had set down in her careful hand. Outside, a weak autumn sun lay across the gravel path between the dower house and Halebury Court. "You propose to repeat the flight," he said, "not the accusation. Rook may not distinguish between the two. Then he will not fly." Temperance held his gaze. An independent falconer must examine him first. If the bird is not fit, the demonstration ends before it begins. Humphrey looked again at the paper. You also require the east casement locked from within, as it was on the 18th. Mr. Barlow on the conservatory roof, with a safety line and 2 witnesses. The original H17 loop and window tail shown under their seals. Not handled until the witnesses record the opening. His mouth shifted faintly. You have anticipated every opportunity for a careless man to ruin your argument. Carelessness is often blamed after design has done its work. He accepted the rebuke without defense. The room had become very still. Temperance had placed 5 numbered conditions upon the desk. First, the exterior window mechanism would be reconstructed without opening the casement. Second, every known wire fragment would be compared in public, but kept distinct. Third, the torn red and white strip would be fitted to the missing section of the main lure, if that lure could be found. Fourth, Rook would be tested under 2 separate conditions. She would stand in the same gauntlet without any lure upon her person. Then a proper falconer would present the familiar red and white lure at the established signal. Fifth, the bird would be controlled by an independent county falconer who had no connection to House Caverton, the Marchams, or the private wagers. Humphrey placed the sheet down. The 4th condition troubles me. Because it risks your reputation? Because Rook is thin. His answer came at once. He was hidden for 3 weeks. Matthew says the breast muscle is reduced. I will not turn him into an exhibit, because society requires spectacle. Temperance felt something warm and painful move through her. Even now, with his name under attack and half the county prepared to interpret mercy as guilt, he thought first of the bird. Nor will I, she said. The independent falconer decides, no one else. And if he refuses, then we present the physical evidence and testimony without a flight. Humphrey studied her face. You would accept less dramatic proof. I would accept honest proof. A bird is not obliged to perform justice for us. The faintest smile touched his mouth. You continue to improve my falconry and diminish my authority. Only the authority you did not truly possess, a distinction that grows more expensive each day. He crossed to the desk, drew a fresh sheet toward him, and began writing. His hand was strong and economical. He instructed Mr. Harcourt to preserve Rook under supervised care, prohibited any removal from the mews without 2 signatures, ordered separate custody for every sealed object, and authorized the steward to request an independent falconer from Ripon. He added that no demonstration would occur without the man's written approval of Rook's condition. Temperance watched him sand the page. There is another condition, she said. Humphrey set down the pounce box. You have left room for one. I speak first. His eyes lifted to hers, before the magistrate, before everyone. The guests who saw Rook land upon me must hear the explanation from me. Not from your solicitor, not from Mr. Harcourt, not from you. The last words were quiet, but they carried the weight of every room from which women like her had been politely removed. Humphrey did not answer immediately. She saw the struggle in him, not over whether she deserved a voice, but over the instinct to place his body and title between her and any possible wound. My first thought yesterday was to take you indoors, he said. I know. It was the wrong thought. It was an incomplete one. You are generous. No, you corrected it. He looked toward the open door, where his mother sat beyond them, then back at Temperance. You will speak first, even if Diana interrupts, especially then, and you will not declare my innocence as a matter of Caverton honor. No, The answer cost him something. She could hear it. My belief is not the proof. It matters to me, Temperance said, but it cannot be the proof. I understand. He took up the pen again and wrote the condition into the instruction. When he had finished, he signed Humphrey Caverton, Halebury, and turned the page toward her. Read it. She did. Every condition stood as she had given it. No phrase reserved a hidden right for him to overrule her. No line reduced her authority to permission granted temporarily by a duke. There is one matter not written here, he said. The air changed. Temperance knew before he spoke that the subject was no longer Rook. If we succeed, Humphrey continued, I do not want anyone to say that justice was the price of my courtship. The word courtship entered the room with more force than a declaration made under moonlight might have done. There was no music, no privacy beyond what propriety allowed, and no certainty that either of them would emerge uninjured from the next public reckoning. Temperance felt her pulse rise. Then do not raise it until afterward. I will not even privately. Not even privately. And if the proof fails, his expression did not change. My regard will not. She looked down at the signed instruction because the steadiness in his eyes had become difficult to bear. You should not promise what you have not tested. I have tested it every time you contradicted me. A breath of laughter escaped her before she could prevent it. Humphrey's face softened. I fear losing your respect more than I fear losing a wager, a bird, or the opinion of every gentleman currently dining beneath my roof. That is an impractical order of priorities. You have made practicality inconvenient. The silence that followed was no longer empty. Temperance had spent years believing affection was safest when left unnamed and untouched. Her late husband had taught her that closeness could become permission taken without asking. Humphrey had done the opposite. He had waited at every threshold she placed before him. She crossed the small distance between their chairs and laid her right hand, ungloved, upon his. He went completely still. He did not turn his palm upward at once. He did not trap the gesture beneath gratitude or triumph. He waited. Temperance curled her fingers around the side of his hand. Only then did he close his own around hers. The contact was warm, steady, and sustained. Neither spoke. His thumb rested against her knuckles without moving. The choice remained visible between them. She had begun it. He had answered. From the adjoining room came the soft turn of one page. The Dowager Duchess did not look in. Temperance held Humphrey's hand through one long breath, then another. Follow the conditions, she said. All of them. I will. Even if you think you know better. That will be the most educational condition. She smiled, but did not release him immediately. Trust, she thought, was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to place something living in another person's care while still retaining the right to withdraw it. At last, she loosened her fingers. Humphrey let her go at once. A movement beyond the window drew her attention. Matthew Dale had entered the Dower House drive on foot. He carried no cap and moved with the urgency of a man who had spent too long resisting a decision. He reached the lower gate, looked toward the parlor windows, and took another step. Then Valentine Marcham appeared from the yew path connecting the drive to Halebury's North Road. Matthew stopped. Valentine said something Temperance could not hear. The falconer's shoulders folded inward. He turned away from the house. Humphrey, she said. It was the first time she had used his Christian name. Both of them heard it. He came to the window beside her. Valentine was already walking back toward the north path. Matthew followed several yards behind, not beside him. Humphrey reached for the bell pull. Before he touched it, hooves struck the gravel outside. Mr. Harcourt rode into the drive at speed, dismounted, and entered without waiting to be announced. "Your Grace," he said from the doorway, breathing hard. "We caught Pike at the mews." Humphrey's face sharpened. "Doing what?" He had Rook in a transport hood. A North Gate cart was harnessed and ready. Temperance looked through the window again. Matthew and Valentine had vanished beyond the yews. On the desk behind her, Humphrey's signed instructions lay open, and the ink was not yet dry. By the morning of the 26th of October, Rook had been placed under the care of Mr. Elias Fenwick, an experienced falconer summoned from Ripon and brought to Halebury before breakfast. He examined the tiercel in the locked mews while Mr. Harcourt, Matthew Dale, Humphrey, and Temperance watched. Rook still wore H18 upon his right jess. He was underconditioned, his breast muscle reduced by poor handling and confinement, but he showed no grave injury. "He can recover," Mr. Fenwick said, "but he won't be flown for anyone's convenience." Humphrey's answer came without hesitation. "Nor will he." Ellis Pike sat in the adjoining equipment room with 2 estate men at the door. The empty transport hood recovered beside him lay on clean cloth upon the table. Mr. Harcourt had recorded its seizure. The cart prepared near the North Gate, and the names of every man present. Pike had spent the night under supervision in a room above the stable office. His confidence had not survived it. "Mr. Marsham told me to move the bird before daylight," he said when Humphrey entered. "That's all." "It is not all," Humphrey replied. Temperance stood near the window, within sight of the Dowager Duchess, who had insisted upon attending despite the cold. Pike looked from one face to another. "I drove the crate from York on the 15th. Mr. Marcham had hired a stable outside the city. I collected it at the goods yard and brought it through the North Gate." "Was Rook inside?" Temperance asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Where had he been since the 2nd? "At the hired stable, as far as I know." "I didn't take him there." "Where did you place him after York?" Humphrey asked. Pike swallowed. "The signal hut." "Who fed him?" "I did some days. Mr. Dale did others." Matthew's face tightened, but he did not deny it. "Who released Rook on the 23rd? Temperance asked. Pike lowered his eyes. "I did, from the North Copse." "At whose order?" "Mr. Marsham's." "Did you know a lure strip had been placed beneath Lady Diana's reticule?" "No, ma'am. I was told the bird would see the signal when he reached the lawn." That answer fit what he could have known. Temperance did not press him beyond it. Pike went on, words quickening now that silence seemed more dangerous. Valentine had promised payment from the wagers. He had ordered the bird held outside Halebury until the public flight. He had told Pike that Rook's sudden return would humiliate Humphrey's household and explain the private odds in Valentine's favor. When the bird landed on Temperance instead, Valentine had blamed Pike for poor timing. The night before, he had ordered Rook removed before the Duke could arrange another demonstration. "Where was the payment written?" Mr. Harcourt asked. Pike shook his head. "I never saw the full account, Mr. Marcham kept papers in the hut, beneath a loose floorboard near the old stove." Matthew closed his eyes. Humphrey turned toward him. "You knew?" "Yes, Your Grace." "How much?" Matthew bent to retrieve his cap from the chair, then stopped as though he had no right to touch it. "Enough to damn myself, not enough to understand all of it." His voice was scarcely above a whisper. "Valentine Marcham learned of an old poaching conviction. It was 28 years ago, before I came to Halebury. I paid the fine. I kept out of trouble after. The late Duke never knew. And Mr. Marcham threatened to expose it, the Dowager asked. He said I'd lose my post, my cottage, and any chance of work in Yorkshire. He said he'd make certain the magistrates heard I'd concealed it from House Caverton. Matthew looked at Humphrey at last. I believed him. Shame roughened every word. On the second, I handed Rook over. I wrote the false loss entry. I fed him at the signal hut after Pike brought him back from York. I told myself I was keeping the bird alive. That was how I made cowardice sound like duty. Temperance heard no self-pity in the confession. Only exhaustion. And H17? She asked. Matthew's hands began to tremble. Mr. Marcham removed it from Rook before the bird went to York. H18 stayed on the right Jess. After Lady Diana told him you'd heard a bell at the goods yard, he said, "You must be frightened into silence." Humphrey's face became very still. Who ordered you to hang it outside her window? Mr. Marcham. Lady Diana knew. Her maid brought the conservatory roof key after 11. Mr. Marcham stood below the roof stair while I lowered the bell. I used wire from the hut. The wind snapped it against the glass once. I heard it from the service court. Matthew's voice broke. I knew she was alone in that room. Temperance felt the memory of the sound travel through her again, but it no longer carried mystery. It carried a man's fear, another man's cruelty, and a woman's willingness to use both. "Did you attach the lure strip to the reticule?" she asked. "No, ma'am. I didn't know of that until Rook flew to you." "Did you keep any of the wire?" Humphrey asked. Matthew reached carefully into the inner lining of his work coat and drew out a short length, wrapped in paper, 3 inches. I cut it from the same spool before the bell was lowered. I thought if he blamed me alone, I might prove the source. Mr. Harcourt received it without bare contact and marked the time. Mr. Barlow called from the yard, examined the wrapped offcut where it lay. Green wax, reverse twist. Same flattened cutter mark, from what I can see. It must be compared under the same conditions as the other pieces. "It will be sealed separately," Humphrey said. By noon, a small party returned to the North Signal hut. Mr. Harcourt carried the keys and evidence papers. Mr. Barlow brought tools. Mr. Fenwick remained at Halebury with Rook. Pike, guarded by 2 estate men, showed the floorboard near the cold stove. Matthew stood apart until Humphrey asked him to indicate the exact place. The board lifted only after Mr. Harcourt marked its edges, and Mr. Barlow loosened it without splintering the wood. Beneath it lay a narrow cavity wrapped in oilcloth. The contents were removed one by one and recorded before anyone examined them. First came a spool of green waxed reverse twist wire, partially used. Then the main red and white lure, folded flat, one strip torn from its edge. The sealed fragment from the reticule was not brought to the hut, but Mr. Harcourt measured the missing section and recorded its shape for later comparison. Rook's old hood lay beneath the lure, a York packing receipt named the hired stable and bore Pike's initials. At the bottom rested a folded wagering memorandum in Valentine's hand, listing gentlemen, amounts, side wagers, and the altered odds after Rook's supposed loss. Humphrey read only enough to confirm the nature of the account before handing it to the steward. "Genuine?" Temperance asked. Mr. Harcourt examined the signature and paper. "It appears so. The solicitor must verify it." Matthew looked at the objects upon separate cloths. "There's your motive." "There is part of it," Temperance said. "Money explains Valentine. It does not fully explain Diana." "Position," Humphrey replied, "and fear that you would expose how much she knew." The wind pressed at the hut door. For the first time since the bell sounded outside her window, Temperance could see the entire shape of the threat. The warning had failed. The accusation had failed. The attempt to remove Rook had failed. Not because Humphrey had declared her innocent, but because every person who tried to move the truth had left marks upon it. Matthew turned to her. "I ask no forgiveness, ma'am." "Good," she said gently. "Forgiveness should not be demanded from the person frightened for your convenience." He bowed his head. "But I will say this. Coercion matters. So does what you chose under it. Both must be told." "Yes, ma'am." Humphrey gave orders for the spool, lure, hood, receipt, and wagering memorandum to be sealed separately and transferred to the estate solicitor. Matthew's wire offcut remained in its own packet. Nothing was combined, nothing passed unrecorded. When the last evidence box had been placed in the guarded cart, Temperance stepped outside the hut. The moor stretched beneath a pale sky, open and cold. Humphrey followed, stopping beside her without speaking. "You kept every condition," she said. "Not yet. There are still witnesses to protect and a public truth to finish. You did not take it from me. I nearly did on the lawn. And then you listened." The control she had held through confession and recovery loosened all at once. Temperance turned toward him and placed both arms around him. Humphrey did not move for one startled heartbeat. Then his arms came around her carefully, one across her back and one at her shoulders, holding without enclosing. She rested her cheek against his coat and felt the steadiness of his breath. No one had asked this of her. No danger required it. She had chosen it. Humphrey's voice came low above her. "I won't mistake this for an answer you haven't given." Temperance closed her eyes. "That is why I can give it." The maid asked to speak before anyone summoned her. On the morning of the 27th of October, Mrs. Wren brought her to the Dower House by the east garden door, where the Dowager Duchess waited in the morning room, with Mr. Harcourt, Mr. Barlow, and the estate solicitor. Humphrey stood near the window. Temperance sat opposite the empty chair, prepared for the witness. The girl who entered could not have been more than 20. Her name was Clara Venn. She had dressed Lady Diana for 3 years, and she looked as though those years had taught her to fear silence more than anger. Mrs. Wren closed the door, but did not lock it. "You ask to speak freely," Humphrey said. "You may do so. No one here will dismiss you for telling the truth." Clara twisted the edge of her apron. "Lady Diana will. Lady Diana no longer controls your employment at Halebury." The girl looked toward Temperance. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Temperance did not offer comfort before hearing the facts. "Tell us what you did." Clara swallowed. "On the night of the 17th, Lady Diana told me to take the conservatory roof key from Mrs. Wren's cabinet. She said the gardener had left a shutter loose and Mr. Marcham wanted it checked before rain. Mrs. Wren opened the key issue book upon the table. The entry at 11:20 bore Clara's signature. "Did you take the key to the roof stair?" the solicitor asked. "Yes, sir. Mr. Marcham was waiting below it. Mr. Dale came from the service passage. I gave the key to him. Matthew was not present. His written statement had already placed him there. Clara's testimony did not create the fact. It joined it." "Did Lady Diana accompany you?" Temperance asked. "Not to the stair. She stayed in her dressing room. She told me to return after." "What happened then?" "Mr. Dale gave the key back near midnight. I returned it to the cabinet before morning. Mrs. Wren turned the ledger so all could see the return mark." "That explains the roof," Mr. Harcourt said. "Not the lure." Clara's hands tightened. Lady Diana cut the strip. The room went very still. "When?" Temperance asked. "On the afternoon before the flight. She had the old red and white lure brought from the North Hut through Mr. Marcham. She cut one narrow length from the edge with her embroidery scissors. Temperance remembered the faint scrape behind the cabinet and the whisper of something being cut. What did she do with it? She wrapped green wire around one end. The next morning, after you put on your cloak, she asked me to leave the dressing room for ribbons. When I came back, she was fastening the reticule over your wrist. Clara's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Later, she told me I'd seen nothing. She said if I contradicted her, she would tell every house in London I was a thief. Humphrey's face hardened. Did you know Rook would be released? No, Your Grace. I didn't know about the bird or the wagers. I thought the strip was meant to embarrass Mrs. Foxley somehow. I didn't understand how. That limit mattered. Temperance could hear it in the careful shape of the answer. Did Lady Diana ever tell you why she wanted me frightened? She said you had become troublesome, she said. His Grace listened when you spoke. Clara's gaze flicked toward Humphrey, then dropped. She said a widow with no family shouldn't be allowed to turn attention into power. Temperance felt no surprise, only the clean ache of hearing contempt stripped of elegance. You have told enough, she said. You will not be forced to guess what you did not know. Clara looked at her with sudden gratitude. The solicitor recorded the statement. Mrs. Wren and the Dowager signed as witnesses. Humphrey added an order preventing Clara's dismissal or removal from the estate until the magistrate had taken her deposition. Only after the statement was sealed did Mr. Barlow begin his comparison. Mrs. Wren brought the packets from separate custody. H-17 remained sealed in the iron cabinet at Halebury and was not yet opened. The short loop taken from the bell, the longer tail recovered from the rainspout, the 3-inch fragment removed. From beneath the reticule, Matthew's retained offcut, and the spool recovered from the signal hut were laid upon separate cloths. Each seal was read aloud before it was broken. Mr. Barlow examined the pieces one at a time. Same reverse twist, he had said. Same green wax pressed between the strands. Same flattened bite from a nicked cutter. He held the spool near the window without allowing it to touch the fragments. This spool carries the same cutter mark at its exposed end. Can you swear they came from this spool? The solicitor asked. I can swear they are consistent in material, twist, wax, and tool mark. I can't swear no other spool in England resembles it. Humphrey nodded. Say exactly that tomorrow. I will, Your Grace. Mr. Elias Fenwick arrived from the mews before noon. He had examined Rook again at first light. The bird can manage one short controlled flight, he said. No height work, no repeated cast. He'll be released only once under each condition, and if he shows fatigue, I stop the demonstration. Temperance asked, will standing in the gauntlet without a lure distress him? Not if the distance is sensible. He may ignore you entirely. That is the point. Mr. Fenwick gave her an approving look. Then the point can be made without cruelty. The county magistrate came shortly afterward. He listened to the proposed order, reviewed the sealed statements, and made his limits clear. The bird's behavior may illustrate how a lure influenced the landing. It will not prove theft, conspiracy, or intent by itself. Those matters rest upon the wire, the key record, the witnesses, the false mews entry, the transport evidence, and the wagering memorandum. Agreed, Temperance said. The demonstration supports the chain. It does not replace it. Then I have no objection. By late afternoon, the practical work was finished. The Dowager retired to rest. Mrs. Wren escorted Clara back to a protected room at Halebury. Humphrey walked with Temperance into the Dower House garden, where bare rose canes cast thin shadows across the gravel. they remained within sight of the windows. He did not speak until they reached the stone bench beneath the yew. "Tomorrow, after the inquiry, may I court you?" Temperance looked at him. The question carried no assumption of success, no debt attached to safety, and no promise offered as reward. "Even so," she answered carefully. "Love cannot become payment for my evidence. It will not. Nor the consolation offered after I have been humiliated. No, and if the room believes me only because you wish to marry me, then justice has failed." Humphrey held her gaze. "Then I will not ask for your answer before justice is complete. I will not speak for you. I will not use courtship to strengthen what must stand without it. You understand what I am asking?" "Yes, you are asking whether I can desire you without purchasing the right to direct you." The honesty of it moved through her more deeply than any ornamented declaration could have done. "And can you?" "I am trying to become the man who can." Temperance felt the answer in the silence that followed. He had not claimed perfection. He had offered effort, witnessed and accountable. Humphrey took one step nearer, then stopped. "May I kiss you?" Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the freedom contained in the question. "Yes." He waited. Temperance closed the remaining distance herself. The kiss was gentle and brief, his hand lifting only to rest lightly against her cheek after she leaned into him. There was no haste in it and no triumph. When they parted, he did not hold her in place. Temperance kept her eyes open. "You waited? You asked me to." "No, I mean before." His expression softened. "I will keep doing so." From the house came the sound of carriage wheels on the drive. Mrs. Wren appeared at the garden door, carrying the locked dispatch box. "Your Grace," she called, "Lady Diana and Mr. Marcham have returned to the East Lawn. They say they intend to challenge the proceedings before the guests arrive tomorrow." Humphrey looked toward Halebury Court, then back at Temperance. "Shall we go?" "Yes." This time, when they walked from the garden, they went side by side. Beneath the locked east window, two estate men had already placed the marked ladder. Mrs. Wren carried H17 in its sealed packet toward the place where the warning would become proof. By 10 o'clock on the 28th of October, the east lawn beneath Temperance's locked window had become a court without walls. The county magistrate stood beside the estate solicitor near a long table covered with plain white cloth. Mr. Harcourt had arranged the sealed evidence packets in the order of their discovery. Mrs. Wren held the household book and the key issue register. Mr. Barlow waited beside the marked ladder with two estate men and a safety rope. Matthew Dale stood several yards away beneath the watch of the independent falconer, while Ellis Pike remained near the magistrate with a written statement already taken. The Dowager Duchess sat beneath a dark canopy with Clara Venn beside her. Sporting guests, servants, and estate workers formed a wide half-circle beyond the white stakes. Lady Diana Marcham stood near the front in a black riding habit, her chin lifted as if disdain might still command the room. Valentine Marcham looked less certain. Humphrey remained at Temperance's side until the magistrate called the gathering to order. Then he stepped back. He had promised she would speak first. He kept the promise. Temperance faced the same people who had watched Rook descend upon her arm. The east casement above them was closed and latched from within. Sunlight reflected faintly from the glass. 5 days ago, she began, a TSL believed lost returned to this lawn and landed upon my gauntlet. A red and white lure strip was found beneath Lady Diana's reticule, which I had been ordered to carry. That landing was presented as proof that I had hidden, trained, and released the bird. Today we will show what the evidence can prove, what it cannot prove, and how each object reached the place where it was found. No one interrupted. Diana's expression remained fixed. Valentine stared at the evidence table. Temperance turned toward the window. Mr. Barlow. The smith climbed the ladder, secured by the rope, while one estate man braced the base, and the other entered the conservatory roof stair. Mrs. Wren confirmed aloud that the east bedchamber door was locked from the corridor side, and the casement remained latched within. The housekeeper then opened the sealed packet containing H17. The silver bell lay inside upon its original linen. A second packet held the 4-inch wire loop removed from the bell. A third held the 9-inch tail recovered from the rainspout. Every seal was read and recorded before breaking. Mr. Barlow fitted a fresh demonstration length of ordinary wire through the bell's fastening, carried it to the roof, and lowered the bell past the stone bracket until it hung outside the locked glass. He did not touch the casement. The bell swayed once in the October wind. A murmur passed through the crowd. The room need not be entered, Temperance said. The window need not be opened. The bell could be lowered from above and recovered from the roof stair. Mrs. Wren raised the key issue book. The conservatory roof key was signed out at 11:20 on the night of the 17th by Clara Venn and returned shortly after midnight. Clara's face had gone pale, but her voice held. Lady Diana told me to take it. I gave it to Mr. Dale near the roof stair. Mr. Marcham was there. Matthew stepped forward when called. That is true. He did not look toward the Marchams. Mr. Marcham threatened my post and cottage by using an old conviction against me. I wrote the false loss entry. I helped conceal Rook. I lowered H17 outside Mrs. Foxley's window. I heard it strike the glass once. Valentine broke in. A frightened servant will confess to anything when a duke threatens him. Humphrey did not move. The magistrate spoke first. His Grace has not questioned this witness today. You will remain silent until invited. Matthew surrendered his retained 3-inch offcut. Mr. Barlow compared it beside the original loop, the window tail, the reticule fragment, and the recovered spool. Each remained on separate cloth. All 5 carry the same reverse twist, he said. All bear green wax pressed into the strands. The cut ends show the same flattened bite from a nicked tool. I cannot swear that no other spool in England resembles this one. I can swear that these pieces are consistent in material, preparation, and cutter mark. The magistrate nodded. That is the proper limit of your evidence, Mr. Harcourt then displayed the red and white lure recovered beneath the north hut floorboard. One narrow section had been torn from its edge. Mrs. Wren opened the sealed packet containing the strip removed from beneath the reticule. Without joining the pieces permanently, the solicitor aligned the torn edges upon the cloth. Fibers, color pattern, and irregular tear matched. Clara spoke next. Lady Diana cut that strip with her embroidery scissors. She wrapped wire around one end. The next morning, she fastened the reticule over Mrs. Foxley's wrist after sending me from the dressing room. Diana turned upon her. You ungrateful little liar. Clara flinched. Temperance answered before Humphrey could. She has stated only what she saw. Valentine's control finally cracked. Diana acted alone in that foolishness. I knew nothing of the reticule. Diana faced him with open fury. You told me the bird would follow the signal. You said the widow would be discredited before luncheon. The accusation fell into the silence they had created for themselves. Valentine took one step toward her. You ordered the bell hung at the window. Because you said she had heard H18 at York. The magistrate lifted his hand. Enough. Your statements will be taken separately, Mr. Harcourt produced the false Mews register entry, the York packing receipt, the empty transport hood seized from Pike, and Valentine's wagering memorandum. Pike confirmed that he had collected Rook from the hired stable outside York, brought him through the north gate, held him near the signal hut, released him from the copse during the public flight, and attempted to remove him again on Valentine's orders. The wagering account showed increased profit if Halebury's champion TSL remained unavailable and Humphrey's entry failed. Temperance waited until every object had been shown and every witness had spoken. Then Mr. Elias Fenwick brought Rook onto the lawn. H18 remained upon the bird's right jess. The TSL looked stronger than he had 5 days earlier, though the independent falconer kept the distance short. Temperance wore the same fitted gauntlet. Mrs. Wren and Clara inspected her cloak, sleeves, reticule, and gloves. No lure was upon her person. Mr. Fenwick released Rook under the first condition. Temperance raised her arm. The bird crossed the lawn, passed above her without turning, and settled upon a low perch near the falconer. No one spoke. Under the second condition, Mr. Fenwick lifted the recovered red and white lure and gave the established signal. Rook's head turned at once. He left the perch, swept past Temperance, and returned cleanly to the proper lure. H18 rang as he landed. The sound carried across the lawn. Temperance lowered her gauntlet. The bird did not know me, she said. He knew the lure planted beneath my wrist. The magistrate looked toward Diana and Valentine. The demonstration illustrates the landing. The criminal questions rest upon the physical evidence, the records, and the sworn testimony. Those matters will proceed formally. Humphrey stepped forward at last. Lady Diana Marcham and Mr. Valentine Marcham are no longer welcome upon Caverton property. Every form of patronage from House Caverton is withdrawn. The evidence will remain with the magistrate and solicitor. I will not pronounce sentence where the law must act. His gaze moved across the witnesses before returning to Temperance. Mrs. Foxley's credibility was never mine to grant. My duty was to protect the conditions in which truth could be heard. I failed once, when I tried to remove her from this lawn. She corrected me. I am indebted to that correction. Temperance looked toward Matthew. His coercion must be recorded. So must his complicity. Matthew bowed his head. Yes, ma'am. Diana was escorted toward the house under Mrs. Wren's supervision. Valentine remained with the magistrate. The crowd slowly dispersed, no applause breaking the gravity of what had occurred. Only after the witnesses were gone did Humphrey find Temperance in the quiet Mews passage. Rook rested beyond the half-open door under Mr. Fenwick's care. Humphrey stopped before her. "I love you," he said. There was no audience and no rank in the words. Temperance felt no need to doubt what she had heard. "I love you too." She stepped forward, placed both gloved hands against his face, and kissed him. He answered gently, one hand settling at her waist only after she leaned closer. When they parted, the bell from the Mews sounded once. This time, neither of them mistook it for a warning. By June of 1868, the sound of a falcon's bell no longer made Temperance search the nearest window. The habit had faded slowly. At first, every clear metallic note carried her back to the east, bedchamber at Halebury Court, to the green waxed wire, Matthew Dale's frozen face, and the knowledge that someone had stood above her in darkness, believing fear would make her obedient. Then the legal proceedings gave each memory a name, a witness, and a consequence. Valentine Marsham, was convicted at York Quarter Sessions on charges arising from the theft and concealment of Rook, the fraudulent wagering scheme, and the intimidation of those who might expose it. Ellis Pike, whose cooperation had come only after he was caught, preparing to remove the bird again, received a lesser sentence according to his part. Lady Diana Marcham did not enter a criminal dock beside her cousin, but her conduct appeared in sworn statements that could not be softened into drawing-room misunderstanding. House Caverton withdrew every form of patronage. Her father removed her from the London season and sent her to live quietly with an elderly aunt, who possessed neither sympathy for scandal nor patience for invented grievances. No engagement appeared to protect her. No fashionable hostess chose to challenge Halebury's account. Society, which had once repeated the lie about temperance with pleasure, corrected itself with much less enthusiasm, yet corrected itself all the same. Matthew remained at Halebury. Humphrey had refused both easy vengeance and easy absolution. The falconer received a formal reprimand, lost independent authority over the Mews Keys for a fixed period, and worked under Mr. Harcourt's supervision. His testimony and restitution saved his place, but not his pride. Temperance considered that just. Coercion had mattered, so had his choices beneath it. Rook recovered more quickly than Matthew did. Under Mr. Fenwick's advice, the Tearcell was rested through winter, fed carefully, and flown only in mild conditions. H18 remained in evidence until the court released it. Hatch 17, the short loop once attached to it, and the longer window wire stayed in official custody until every statement had been taken and every appeal period passed. When the 2 bells were finally returned to House Caverton by written receipt, Mrs. Wren entered the date in the household book as solemnly as though the silver objects had acquired rank. Humphrey did not laugh when Temperance asked to see the receipt. He placed it in her hands and waited while she read every line. Their courtship had lasted 7 months, long enough for the first heat of scandal to cool and for affection to prove it could survive ordinary mornings. Humphrey called at the Dower House during proper hours and sometimes with the Dowager Duchess, and sometimes while she sat in the adjoining room pretending not to listen. He brought estate papers when Temperance asked questions about land use, bird habitat, or the treatment of older servants. He brought no jewels until she told him she would not mistake a gift for a command. She learned that his humor sharpened when he was anxious, that he read correspondence twice before giving an answer, and that he had spent years believing responsibility required him to stand alone. He learned that Temperance disliked lilies indoors, trusted weather more than timetables, and still paused before contradicting a man in public, even when she knew he was wrong. Each time he waited. Each time she spoke. When he formally asked her to marry him, he did so in the Dower House parlour with the Dowager present and the garden door open to a warm May afternoon. He offered no rescue, no restoration of status, and no promise that marriage would make society kind. He asked for partnership. Temperance accepted. After reading the settlement drafted in consultation with her own solicitor, it preserved her widow's income, personal property, and authority over the small funds she had inherited. Humphrey added a clause ensuring that any observations, journals, or writings she produced remained hers. "You realize," she told him after signing, "that this leaves me free to disagree with you in permanent ink. I had assumed that was the central purpose of marriage. A dangerous admission from a duke. I have survived worse scrutiny. They married quietly in the parish church in the first week of June. There were no crowds from London, no display arranged for newspapers, and no attempt to turn the ceremony into public compensation for what Temperance had suffered. The Dowager Duchess wept discreetly. Mrs. Wren did not. She only pressed Temperance's hand after the register was signed and said, "You were always worth hearing, Your Grace." Matthew stood at the rear with his cap held against his chest. Clara Venn attended beside the housekeeper. Dressed in a new blue gown, purchased with wages, she now controlled herself. When the bells rang from the church tower, Temperance did not start. Humphrey noticed. He said nothing until they were alone in the carriage. Then he lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. "You heard them differently." "I did. Because they were expected. Because no one meant them to frighten me." He held her gaze. "No one ever will again with my knowledge." Temperance touched his cheek. "Do not promise me a world without cruelty. Promise me you will listen when I name it." "I promise." Their wedding breakfast was held at Halebury, but by late afternoon they escaped the congratulations and took a smaller carriage toward the lower moor. A groom followed at a respectful distance with a picnic basket, while Matthew and Mr. Fenwick brought Rook in a travelling hood by another path. The weather was clear. The Yorkshire sky washed blue after morning rain, and the heather carried the first purple hints of summer. Humphrey spread a rug upon a sheltered rise above the lower fields. Temperance removed her gloves and accepted bread, cheese, and strawberries from the basket, while Rook rested beneath the shade of a low hawthorn. The two returned bells lay in a small leather case beside Matthew. H17 had been polished only enough to remove grime, not the tiny marks earned through use. H18 retained its higher note and the faint catch at the end. Matthew fitted them to the paired jesses under Mr. Fenwick's eye, H17 on the left and H18 on the right, exactly as the Muse records had once shown. His hands remained steady. "There," he said, "as they should be." Temperance looked at him. Not as before. Matthew met her gaze. "No, Your Grace, not as before." He stepped back. Mr. Fenwick handed Humphrey the falconry glove prepared for the flight, but Humphrey turned it toward Temperance. "Together?" he asked. The glove was broader than the one she had worn during the accusation, built with room for both their hands beneath the wrist support. Temperance slid her left hand inside. Humphrey placed his beneath hers, supporting the weight without taking control. Rook stepped from Matthew's glove to theirs, alert and fully recovered, his feathers bright in the summer light. Hutch 17 gave a low silver note. Hutch 18 answered higher. Temperance felt Humphrey's arm come around her waist. He paused before settling his hand there. She leaned into him, granting the answer without words. Mr. Fenwick removed Rook's hood. The tiercel looked toward the open moor. Temperance lifted their shared arm. "Go on," she whispered. Rook launched. His wings opened cleanly, carrying him above the heather and into a wide circle over Halebury's lower fields. The bells sounded in alternating notes as he climbed. No wire restrained them. No hidden hand controlled the wind. For one breath, he seemed small against the immense Yorkshire sky. Then he turned. Humphrey watched the flight beside her, his hand warm at her waist. "I know which is which now," he said. "Do you? H17 is lower. H18 catches after the higher note." Temperance smiled. "Very good. You taught me to listen. I taught you to stop assuming you already had. A harsher lesson, a more useful one." Rook descended toward the proper lure, Mr. Fenwick swung below the rise, then settled cleanly to the glove. The paired bells rang once together. Temperance turned within Humphrey's arm and kissed him before he could speak. He answered with quiet tenderness, letting her choose the closeness and the length of it. When they parted, she rested her forehead briefly against his. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." The words required no witness, no seal, and no public correction. Below them, Rook spread his wings once, free to leave and free to return, while two silver bells carried across the open moor.